Welcome to LivingLifeDyingDeath.com, the place for healthy conversations about death and dying. I'm Jennifer Collins Taylor, and I'm here with Dr. Gordon Thornton. Thank you so much for joining me on Living Life, Dying, Death.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Why don't you tell me and the audience a little bit about your work and how you came to be a thanatologist?
Well, I started teaching thanatology in 1975 at the school that I retired from just recently.
Oh, congratulations.
Indiana, well, thank you. Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It was probably one of the first 50, 60 courses in the United States. I taught developmental psychology, which is a lifespan psychology course, and we would cover the whole lifespan. Students were extremely interested in end-of-life issues, in the dying process. In fact, I would have panels, and I'd have half the class that would ask to do the panel on death, and not too many on marriage, which is surprising, given they were college students. So there was a tremendous amount of student interest. The sociology department had just introduced a course called Human Sexuality, and I thought, that's strange that sociology should be offering a human sexuality course. It ought to be a psychology course. And the thought was that if I didn't start teaching psychology of death and dying, sociology would teach psychology of death and dying. And so I proposed the course, and it was pretty much a hit. It's interesting, at that time, death and dying was a very popular course with students, and I think still is. But the longer answer is, my mother was a nurse, and death was something that was openly talked about. As a young child, I went to funerals we had a boarding house. I remember going to the funeral of a little 2-year-old who had died. Older people that had died, they weren't necessarily family members. We had animals that would die, and we were very open about it. This was not, Rover must have run off. I mean, we would see them. But when it came to personal things, that was a little bit different. When my father was dying and I was a teenager, I didn't handle it very well. It was pretty much the kind of denial stuff that you get in the 1970s. We're afraid to talk about it. I remember one time he was sick with cancer, and we were at home, and my father had been a lieutenant colonel in the Army and had all these medals. He was a pretty successful military person, and he said to me, I'd like to have these medals labeled. So he's going to put them out on a nice plaque. And I said, oh, sure, Dad. And he said, I'm not going to be around very much longer. It would have been a perfect opportunity to let him talk more about his cancer. But I wasn't ready to do that. And I said, oh, I'll get them typed up, Dad, no problem, I always regretted not having had the courage or the knowledge to let that be an open communication. That experience was one that really got me when I read about Kubler-Ross and openness about talking about death and dying. That got me to say, boy, this is the kind of course that would be beneficial for students. Now, it was a very academic course. I didn't try to make it clinical at all, but we did share and talk about things, and I was just amazed. And I'm amazed at how much students would support other students. And I think one of the things that death education does is it gives permission to people to talk about things that they need to talk about. So I mentioned my dad's death. My mother died of a disease called polycystic kidneys. And one of the best conversations I ever had with my mother was she was on kidney dialysis, not ready to die. I mean, she was on dialysis for 5 years, so this was early on. But we talked about what she would want done and what she wouldn't want done, and what she wanted for the funeral. It was one of the best conversations I had, because it was clear, okay, I know what you want done. I know when you want life support or not, other things done. And it was really a great sharing. Kind of sharing that I mentioned I didn't have with my father.
My experience is similar to like that college class, once again, that people really do want to talk about death and dying and their mortality and the loss. It's just getting the conversation started quite often.
Yes, I think you're right.
People want to have meaningful conversations that matter.
Yes, and I think once you get past that fear of bringing up the subject, you find people really ready to talk about it.
Especially in a non-judgmental, compassionate atmosphere.
Yes, that's true. And people really have lots of opinions and feel freer to talk about it. So I think you're right. Getting people to be open about it is real important. And the shame is that when people aren't open about it, when a death occurs, you often have regrets. You have uncertainty about what to do with things, and there isn't very good preparation. And unfortunately, most Americans don't make preparations. They don't talk about it.
It's true. It's true. We'll try to change that, you and I, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's
all the
right.
other members of the ADEC community. Part of this
Yeah.
philosophy, if we start sharing our stories and our memories and our ideas and beliefs and thoughts about death, then when it comes to preparing our documents for our final wishes and our advance directives, we are more prepared and it's easier because the conversation is already flowing. So
Yes, I think you're right.
So it's a lot about the stories. I know that's part of the theme this year at the conference.
Yes, that's right.
Our memories and our stories and our experiences.
Yes, and I'm sure many of the people looking here probably can also tell you how much they may have regretted not getting stories. Most of us look back on our parents and say, "Oh, I wish I'd asked them more, or I wish I'd paid more attention to some of the stories they've told." And so it doesn't have to be just conversations about advance directives, but conversations about your life,
Absolutely.
about your hopes and dreams, and
Absolutely.
that's all part of it. So, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen when we're alone. We really need to be able to share with people.
In community. One of the questions I do want to ask you is, are you personally afraid to die?
No, I'm not afraid to die, but like Allen, I don't necessarily want to be around to meet it.
I use that quote quite often.
Yeah.
It's an excellent one. That's part of our human nature.
Yeah, that's right.
Our human condition.
And I guess I could say really seriously that having just had a kidney transplant, I mean, you never know how operations are going to go and anything like that. And but there's this kind of common acceptance. My sister donated her kidney. We have a genetic disease. She doesn't have it, and I have it. And even though I teased her a lot when she was a kid, she still came right forward. And it's interesting. Sometimes we're not very good at accepting gifts. And this is a gift, and I didn't want to accept it at first. And when you talk about things and you have good friends, they can sometimes give you a perspective. Because I was sharing that I didn't think this was right for her to have to do this, and friends would say, this is a gift she's giving you, and you don't turn down a gift like that. That's
beautiful
gift. Yeah, that's
well,
right.
it's the gift of love.
Yeah, that's right. It sure was a gift of love.
I do want to also ask you, what's your philosophy of life?
Smelling roses, can still smell as part of it. But don't live your life as if it's your last day. That's interesting because in Death and Dying, it really is about life and living. I mean, we talk about things like causes of death, to get people to live healthier lives. We talk about the importance of family and the importance of communication as we're doing. That's all about life. And sometimes people say, well, if we'd be much nicer and kinder to people if we lived every day as if it were going to be our last day. And I'm all for gentleness and kindness to people, but I don't think you have to do it because it's your last day. I think you ought to do it because that's part of what humans should be to others.
Well, I've so enjoyed visiting with you this afternoon.
I've enjoyed our conversation too.
Thank you so very much, and I appreciate all the amazing work you've done over the years for thanatology and the death and dying community.
Well, thanks. You can tell she's a good clinical person because she looks at me all the time. And you keep forgetting to look at that camera.
I know.